Howdy all, grab yourselves a beer, it's time to talk Path of Exile, and Synthesis League starts in less than 12 hours from the time I'm recording this, probably less than 6 from the time that you're viewing it. And I've put together a quick video to outline my League start plans. I've mentioned in some of my other videos on League start currency generation that there is an enormous opportunity to get yourself a lot of currency very early in a league if you're one of the first people to get into maps. Not necessarily one of the absolute first, but one of the first few thousand people in maps, so that you're in a position where by the time that there's tens of thousands of people in maps, you're there selling tier 8 maps, selling tier 12 maps, while the demand massively outstrips the supply of these maps. So for that reason, my focus is going to be on pretty much ignoring the synthesis mechanics and just getting to maps as quickly as possible. So my goal is to get into maps before 7 hours after the league launch. This is not a world record time, it's not close to it. The best players will be there within 4 hours, but it's something that I think I can achieve. And I put together a few quick notes. If you're someone that's run the leveling content quite a few times, you feel you know it, but you just want some quick pointers on how to make it faster. This is intended for my build. Now I'm going to play the League as a Hand of Wisdom in action Molten Strike Occultist. However, that's not a build that you can start playing from day one. The build makes a lot of sacrifices to stack as much intelligence as possible, and it doesn't get rewarded on that until it gets access to the Hand of Wisdom in action unique claw, which can't be found until players start killing Breachlord Zoth. Breachstones aren't available until players are in maps, and so it's a good while. You're talking 12 hours or so until the first ones are available on the server, and really it's about a week until that unique claw drops down in price considerably. So I'm anticipating that it'll be a little while. I am also going to want to get the upgrade, the prophesized upgrade of Atziri's Mirror Shield, which is a very expensive item to trade for. If Betrayal is anything to go by, it'll probably be about 30 Exalted Orbs, but that's a late game. That's a sort of, maybe not quite a whole of League goal, but that's a first 3 weeks of the League sort of goal. And that the prophecy for that mostly comes from a divination card that drops from the bosses of the Vaal Temple map. So, again, not many people will be doing Vaal Temple during the first couple of days of the League, let me tell you that. So my key milestones. The first thing is your pre-League preparation. I say here 3 times, make sure there's beers in the fridge, and that you've got your build outline done, you've got your Atlas plans made, you're rested up, you've got your loot filter. I'm going to be getting my loot filter organized during the patching. And that's because Neversink, who is one of the community developers that runs a website that handles a lot of loot filter stuff, he generally gets it done very close to League start. He's not the only loot filter available. There's a popular one made by a person called Stupid Fat Hobbit, but I'm familiar with Neversink, and filterblade.xyz is his website. It is outstanding. Check, double check, and triple check the time that the League starts. For me, it's 7 AM on Saturday. For you, it's probably something entirely different. Have appropriate snacks handy, and start with ones that won't make you feel hungrier. So, got cold meat available, and I've also got biscuits and things like that for later on in the day. Double check you got your beers, and just decide on the silly stuff too. What microtransactions are you using? What ugly flashy heralds are you using? And how can you make the most ugly character imaginable to ruin the day of anyone else that you happen to be playing with? Very important that you don't get Baby Shark in your head, because that could ruin your day and put you off while you're playing, and I'd say sorry if I just put it in there, but I'm really not sorry. And then third, double check the beer. Alright, now we get to the serious stuff. Act 1. I'm going to be creating a Scion first, because the Scion gets Onslaught support very, very early. They'll just kill Hillock, and then they'll drop Onslaught support into the stash, and they will never be played again. However, they will just quickly check for various 3-link combinations at the vendor, and they will be checking for 10% speed boots. It is very important that when you close down the Scion, that you exit to character selection and that you do not either Alt F4 or exit to the login screen. At the start of a league, you will have a wait time, and if you actually log out to the point that the game client requests your password again, at that point, you are going to have to join the back of the queue. Very important, don't do that. Now create a witch with the character name that you actually want, and just rush to the Mudflats. So we're bypassing the Tidal Island for now. Complete the mandatory quest there. Waypoint back to the Tidal Island, kill Hailrake. Now I'm going to Town Portal here. This is because I want to avoid logging out as much as possible, because it's so easy to muck up and misclick and accidentally find yourself logging completely out of the game and winding up really regretting it. So you'll then Town Portal back, grab your Quicksilver and transmute and augment it. Don't spam alteration orbs on this because it cannot get the adrenaline suffix. The one that you get for Hailrake is an item level 4 Quicksilver Flask, and item level 5 is required for the flask to be able to roll the adrenaline suffix. You want to pick up Frostbomb, and we'll be running Frostbomb plus Onslaught plus whatever other support we can. Zerg to the Ledge, we're going to skip the passive quest until Act 2, and we're going to try to only kill magic monsters and to kill stuff that's in the way, or to recharge the Quicksilver Flask. Magic monsters have, I believe it's 3.5 the XP of an equivalent white mob, whilst only having 2.5 or so the hit points, and they have 8 times the loot that a white monster has. Now, we're going to skip the prison trial for now. We're going to come back to that later, and that's because we don't yet have Flame Dash, and we only have 1 Quicksilver Flask. We can do it faster, even though there's a little bit more backtracking. After Brutus dies, grab your loot, Town Portal rather than running forward, and then pick up the appropriate added cold or added lightning gem to run in conjunction with your Frostbomb. Pick up a Dexterity Amulet during this point if you can. Deviate from this if you've got good items. That's just to deal with stat requirements on items. And we want to run Act 1 without Chest Armor. Chest Armor slows you down 3 to 6% move speed, and then you can just... Most players that are trying to level fast will run without any chest armor until about Act 3, 4, or even 5, depending on how confident they are. If you start dying, then definitely deviate from this plan earlier. I'm going to try and avoid using chest armor until Act 3, but I'm not experienced with that. That's something that the better races really have down pat. We're going to do Fairgraves as soon as we get to him, and then we're going to skip turning it in until a Cavern waypoint. Then we're going to pick up Flame Dash and Stormbrand. Stormbrand has to be purchased on a witch, and even though Stormbrand has just had a 20% haircut in damage, it's still incredibly good. I'm just going to ignore cold resistance. A lot of players like to get Sapphire Rings to be able to tank Mavail's attacks. I'm just going to dodge them because Mavail is very slow casting. Her Ice Storm, the one that's similar to Firestorm mechanically, will probably hit you occasionally, but just doesn't do that much damage. The one that does the big damage is the one where she fires a stream of icicles straight at you, and that's easy to sidestep. In Act 2, players that haven't done leveling recently may not realise this. You want to do the Den. That quest sucked once, but now it has a guaranteed Quicksilver Flask that is high enough level to roll Adrenaline. This is unless you get very lucky, this is the first Adrenaline Flask you can get, and it's really worth picking up. You want to go kill Creighton, then go do the Chamber of Sins trial and kill Fiddleitis, but we're not doing the Crypt trial quite yet. We'll come back to that in a sec. We'll go to the Riverways, follow the road, Flame Dash to jump to cheat across the rivers, and get the waypoint in that zone. The waypoint's actually really useful here. If you know the zone layout well, the waypoint will save you a lot of time. If you're not sure, don't worry so much about it. Then go kill Oak in the wetlands. Go get the waypoint and waypoint back to the Riverways. Then we'll jump into the Western Forest. We'll help Alira. We'll do the emblem. We'll kill a spider, And then at this point, we'll go back to Act 1 and we'll kill the skill point crab. The reason we held off on the skill point crab is it's fairly close to a waypoint, and we now have 2 Quicksilver Flasks. We're just much faster. The XP that you get there isn't very significant if you do it at level, so we're just going to go back over level and just go absolutely nuts, destroying everything in sight with Stormbrand. We're going to try and find a 3-linked triple blue item, and this will be faster casting, arcane surge, and I've made a typo here. That should be the I'm just trying to think what it's called now. Brand Recall. We're going to go and do the crypt trial at this point, and we're going to skip the quest down there. Even if it's a challenge, we can just come back for it later at a point that you can spend a minute doing it 3 weeks into the league. That minute will only be an opportunity cost of 2 or 3 Chaos Orbs, whereas every minute that it takes you to get to maps can mean a lot more than that. Pick up Brand Recall from Yuna, and then zoom to the Vaal Obersoul, and post a toucan in Global. And, well, actually don't do that because you'll probably get muted. Now, Act 3. Grab the Crematorium and the Trial. Then, in the sewers, there's usually 1 bust before the waypoint, but there are sometimes 2. Now, use the term depth first search a couple of times. This is just basically a maze navigation technique where you go as far as you can along a route before backing up. In practice, it usually means just follow the right-hand wall, and then return to your last. When you reach a dead end, just return to the last intersection that you passed, and then just continue. You'll be able to continue following the right-hand wall from there. That will usually quickly find you. So after the waypoint, do that following the right wall to find the second bust. It's usually down there, and it's usually pretty quick. And then find the 3rd bust on your way out to the marketplace. There'll be the zone in the marketplace that I think is called the Mausoleum. Go do that trial. Then pick up the waypoint and the spool in the battlegrounds. Then go to Solaris and waypoint back, and then do the docks. There are slightly faster ways of doing this, but I'm not confident with them. I know that the very best racers have discovered that the best way to do this is to pick up the ribbon spool, disregard the battlefield waypoint, run to the entrance to the docks but don't go through it, proper town portal down there, and then go through Solaris, get the Solaris waypoint, log out or log to character selection screen, then come back in, then use your own town portal, and you're right at the docks. This is the fastest way, but it adds extra complexity, and the time that's saved from it, which might be of the order of a minute, is probably not worth the effort over the less complex approach. Anyways, we're just then going to check fire. We'll just deal with all of the various little questing stuff in the docks. Then we'll get to Diala, do all of the turn-ins, go to the sewers. Very important at this point that you check your resists. Gravicius is brutal if you have bad fire resist. He's very beatable, but just play careful. Then I'm going to be picking up Vortex and going back to Act 2, picking up Controlled Destruction and Elemental Focus. I can't use Efficacy, which is my intended 4th link, until Act 6. I will then be checking my cold resistance, and if it's low, I'll be playing very carefully on Piety. We then go to the Imperial Gardens and do the trial there. Then Dominus, which requires checking your lightning resistance. If you're familiar with the fight, lightning resistance is important because the hardest of his attacks to dodge is the stream of light, is the long-range stream of lightning. The rest is all very easy to dodge. But if you're not familiar with the fight, you probably also want to get your cold resistance up as well. Then do Dominus, then go to the Aqueduct, then the Dried Lake, then the Act 1 trial that we skipped over. Now, one thing that's important here, Aqueduct is one of the places you can get a Tabula Rasa card, the divination cards that get a Tabula Rasa. I do not suggest farming Aqueduct or Blood Aqueduct for that. We'll be coming back to that because it's in my early mapping strategy that I will be. I'm intending to farm the channel map, Tier 3 channel, as my alternative means of attaining a Tabula Rasa. Now, as I'm playing a witch, I can't get haste. If I'm partied, I'm going to get my allies to pick up haste. If I'm solo, I'll be using Malediction, which I think we'll be able to get on a witch, but I'm not sure. And failing that, it'll be Hatred. It's very important, if you're in a party leveling, you want to spread out auras amongst yourselves. So don't use the same aura, especially if you're intending to stick with that group for several hours. And it's very good. Whilst haste is not a very strong aura if you're playing by yourself, it is extremely potent in a group. Giving everyone move speed, giving everyone additional action speed is fantastic. So definitely make sure that one person has haste, and then run things like Malediction or Anger. Anger is the most universal. Pretty much any build that hits gets a lot of benefit out of Anger. So someone running Anger is great. If your party members are running attacks, then you want to consider whether it's better to be running Wrath or Hatred, depending upon their builds. Now, normal Labyrinth. There's a website, poelab.com, that will have I guess a cheat sheet of sorts to the Labyrinth. It has a layout for you. Very useful to have. I'm going to do that after doing Dried Lake, but before going into the mines. You can vary from this if you want. Now, in Act 4, so I've already done the Dried Lake. I will be picking up Stone Golem because it is stupidly OP at this level. It heals you a tremendous amount. And even though I'm an Energy Shield build, while you're leveling, you will primarily be using life. You simply won't have access to very good Energy Shield gear while you're leveling, and there's no cost-effective way to craft it. So while you're leveling, as I say, just make do with life gear, but perhaps on Energy Shield basis if you can. Being an occultist, I will be picking up the defensive nodes first. There's the first node that gives 100 Energy Shield, and the second node that gives 150. This is all flat Energy Shield, and at that point I actually can start going a bit more out of my way to use Energy Shield gear. But in any case, you will be taking some damage to your life from chaos damage and whatever, and Stone Golem will help with that. You can alternately go for a more offensive Golem if you prefer, but my experience is it's just really hard to pass up Stone Golem. You'll be dropping Stone Golem when the strength requirement becomes too high to comfortably use. Now, we're going to rush to Deshret, get the skill point quest, then we're going to run to the Crystal Veins waypoint, then we're going to do Calm. Before doing Calm, we're going to check fire resistance. If it's low, we're going to be careful. Then we're going to do Duresso, then we're going to check if we've got a Bleed Flask, and then take on Piety. Then we're going to do Malachi. Malachi is a fight that you can outskill it. If you're familiar with it, you can dodge almost all of his damage. If not, then you do want to have a fair amount of all resists. Not necessarily capped, but in hardcore that would be more important. You just want to generally be a fairly tanky character for Malachi if you're not super familiar with the fight. But if you've done the fight a bunch in high tier maps, then you'll know it pretty well, and that's all good. Next up we have Act 5. The whole act is really linear. Just check your lightning resistance before Innocence, and we want to look for 2 quadruple blue 4 links. What I do is when I'm crafting gear as I'm leveling, I look for items that already have the perfect gem sockets for me. And then I will just throw any old crap orbs, any cheap orbs that I've got onto those items. So for instance, if I'm running through and I find a minimum level 30, so it's a bit out leveled Energy Shield piece, and it's 4 blue, I'm going to just take that. Even if it's a blue item that's got a shit roll on it, that's fine. I'll just make do with it. The key thing is your gem links. They will carry you during leveling. In Act 6, pick up Haste if I wasn't able to get it, and I'm going to pick up Efficacy. This is the 4th link on my Vortex. I'm also going to pick up Cold Snap, Bone Chill, Efficacy, and Controlled Destruction. If I can get a Vile Cold Snap, great, but I'm not going to count on having that. So that's my 2 4-link blue items. Also want to be continually checking for boots that have got movement speed on them, and movement speed is the stat you care about on boots. I mean, I'm not really going to be relying upon Stormbrand anymore. It's still there, it's still something that does some damage, and were I to intend to continue playing the cold damage occultist into the very highest tiers of content, I would then be using Stormbrand to trigger elemental equilibrium. However, I'm probably not even going to do that because it's not something I'm not intending to take the character to the extremes of endgame without a full respec of it. Now, if your fire resist is 60 or less, be very careful in the mudflats. There is a boss in there that does savage fire arrows that basically she fires an arrow up in the air, it lands down on the ground, spills out a pool of lava, and that lava will rip you to shreds if you don't have fire resistance. You want to be staying moving during that fight. We'll then get to the prison. You want to do the trial there. When you get to the fight against Chevron and Brutus, if your name is Zizaran, be very careful because that hits hard and it can send you straight to standard. And I'm sure that you know what I'm talking about there if you've watched Zizaran's excellent video on speed leveling. I'm going to do Abrath and Rizlatha on curve, so that means at the level that I'm like without out leveling them and coming back later. This is because I'm going to be playing on softcore, and while those bosses are dangerous, I really don't care that much if I lose 5% XP and in a few seconds fighting them. However, if you're playing on hardcore, you should skip those bosses for the moment. Come back to them later, and actually the same applies. You should be very careful with Chevron and Brutus as well, and maybe use Decoy Totem on that fight. If your cold and electric resistances are under 60, be very careful on the Brine King. When he goes to his phase of calling in the waters and having Nessa cast spells at you, at that point you might even want to go as far as to teleport back to town. We're a town portal, then jump back into your portal and sit there on the invulnerability timer. In Act 7, we're going to go straight to the crypt. We're going to get the trial, and we're going to get the Malagaro's map. We're then going to do Chamber of Sins, the trial there, and then we're going to push to Ralakesh. If you don't have a bleed flask, this is a horrible fight. Then we're going to go get the Fireflies and Gruthkul, and Gruthkul is one that you really should hold off if you're playing on hardcore. If you don't have a granite flask, then just hold off. Then just be very scared of Gruthkul's attacks. Guy hits like a freight train, and if you make any mistakes in there, and it's quite easy to make mistakes because of the awkward lighting on the ground, or the awkward lighting and the difficult to differentiate colors of the dangerous areas on the ground. Make any mistakes there, then it's lights out. But because I'm playing on softcore, that's 5% XP. I don't really care that much. There's a quest at the very end of the causeway, just before you get into the Vile City. It has a big reward from memory. I think it's a skill point quest. It doesn't look like one, but it is, so grab that, then the rest of it is straightforward. In Act 8, we have the hardest boss in the entire leveling process, which is Doedre, and the Cauldron Doedre. She is one of those bosses that you can just do enough DPS to basically instant kill if you're playing a build that really shines during early leveling. But if you're not, she hits hard. She has basically spawned something akin to a bit of a bullet hell on the ground, and she will rip you to shreds if you aren't careful. The Cauldron has a lever you can interact with. If you do that, she will change from she has a physical form where she inflicts physical damage over time auras and things like that. I believe that's what it is. And then there's a chaos damage form where there's poisons and other chaos DOTs. Each time that you flip the Cauldron, she'll change from one to the other, and you'll get a few seconds respite where all of the bad shit on the ground will disappear and she will stop attacking you. This is something you can do to have a bit of a rest if you're in real trouble, but it will also give her a buff that gives her tremendous increases to damage. So you want to you want to basically do that as little as you can. Ideally, you want to kill her without having to use that lever, or whilst only interacting with it at most once, but that may not always be possible. In any case, respect this boss. If you're playing on hardcore, you want to go into it with a lot of life. You do not want to... it is so easy to make a mistake on that fight that you want to go into it with a lot of life and just be able to make those mistakes and not be sent to standard for them. Now I go east in Act 8. I do the docks, depth first search on the right to get the the MacGuffin for Clarissa, then to find Clarissa, then to kill Tolman, and then I do the Grain Gate, where you just go through the doors that have corpses marking them. Don't forget to kill the Gemling Legionnaires. They're pretty much in your way. I think it's very hard to progress through here without killing them. But they are a skill point quest, and they don't sort of look like one. Next up, we'll do the Solaris side. We'll turn right in there, and then I tend to cross over the Harbour Bridge. So Solaris Temple to Solaris Concourse to Harbour Bridge to Lunaris Concourse. There is another way you can go. You can go back to town, then go Promenade, Bathhouse. I'm not actually certain which one's faster. I think the Harbour Bridge way feels faster, but look, I could very well be wrong. Do the Looney Temple, then go into the Bathhouse, go to Yugal off to the side, and the Trial in the Bathhouse. At this point, you're going to finish up Act 8, and then do the very start of Act 9, and I do a bit of a waypoint run in Act 9. Then I go and get to... then I go and do the Cruel Labyrinth. So the waypoint run is to go to the desert, do the desert quest, go to the foothills, pick up the waypoint, kill Boulderback, and that completes another quest. Then get the quarry waypoint, as well as doing the trial in the mines. That trial is actually a merciless trial, but that doesn't matter. We need to do it at some point. Next, we'll go and hit Cruel Labyrinth, and then go into Act 9 again. Go to the foothills waypoint, kill the Basilisk, go to the town, get access to the Oasis, kill the Scorpion God there, then go to the quarry, do that zone that looks like a factory map, kill the god in the quarry that is the Sandstorm God, so thanks to Darude, and then do the Beast. In the Beast, again, Doedre is very dangerous and has quite a few complex mechanics. If you have a lot of damage, you can largely ignore them, you can burst them down. But basically, she has 3 totems that constantly spam out curses that like stacking versions of curses. And then at some points in the fight, she'll have a Screaming Tantrum. When she does her Screaming Tantrum, if you need to block line of sight, and the totems are the only things that can do this. Your other option during the Screaming Tantrum is to Town Portal and abuse the invulnerability period when you come back in. The Screaming Tantrum doesn't kill you instantly, and if you have an instant life flask, you should be alright to get through it, but it might burn all of your instant life flask charges. But yeah, blocking line of sight by hiding behind a totem is the best way to handle that. If you've got an attack that doesn't aim very well, so it hits the whole screen, perhaps you're using a skill that has inherent chaining like Arc, you can get into a bit of trouble here. And yeah, then you'll kill the Depraved Trinity, and then it's Act 10. Act 10 straightforward enough, you've got a couple of trials to do. If it's softcore and you're undergeared, you can always just Death Rush Kitava to get to maps quicker. The reward is worth it. I generally skip Merciless Labyrinth unless I'm in a serious party with someone whose build comes together upon the 6th Ascendancy point. I will then come back to Merciless Labyrinth at a point where I considerably outgear it. Now that you're in early maps, you're probably about level 64 at this point, maybe 66 or 67 depending on how much you've been killing. If your offense feels lacking, then your next goal is going to be to farm up a Tabula, and we're going to do a couple of tricks with the Atlas, manipulate the Atlas of Worlds a little to do this. So skip this step if your damage feels fine, but you want to do tier 1 maps until you have a Strand, and that can only drop from the tier 1 that's connected to Strand. You want to do no other tier 2s at all. So Strand is your only map that you're running that is not a tier 1. And then you'll do that. You'll run your Strand, and hopefully it'll drop you a Channel. Channel's the only tier 3 that can drop from Strand. You're now going to run tier 1s and Strands until you've got your first Channel. Then you're going to be using Alchemy Orbs on Channel maps and running these to farm tabular cards. You have a good chance of getting getting Channels back from these runs, as well as the tier 4s that are adjacent to Strand. Sorry, not to Strand, but adjacent to Channel, and also the more Strands as well. Any -1 that you get, so any tier 2 drop that you get, will always be a Strand, or the other map that is adjacent, which I think is Peninsula. Then any tier 3 you get will always be a refund, it'll be a Channel, and any tier 4 will be something adjacent. So we'll keep running these. If you've got an Atsuri set at this point, so a Sacrifice at Midnight set, then what you want to do at this point, so your only completed maps are Strand, Channel, and some or all of the tier 1s. Go and run the Apex of Sacrifice. If you know the fight well, you need to know the fight well, all the fights in it well to do this at this point. But if you know the fights well, go and run the Apex of Sacrifice and kill all of the magic monsters in there. Every monster in that zone is magic, and magic monsters drop a lot of maps. Every map that you drop would usually be a tier 4, but because there are no tier 4s unlocked on your Atlas, they'll be downgraded to be Channels. It is entirely likely to get 5 or more Channel maps doing this. Then you go and run those Channel maps with Alchemy Orbs on them, and you will get yourself a Tabula Rasa in not too much time. This is the quickest way to farm one. It's popular to farm one in Act 9, but I think it's better to hold off unless you absolutely need that extra offense in order to power through Act 10. Keep in mind also that we've skipped Valenta at the moment, who gives a skill point in Act 10. At some point you're going to want to go back and get her. Now once I've got this, assuming I do decide to go the Tabula route, I will then add Hypothermia and Swift Affliction to my main Vortex setup. Now, once your offense is fine in maps, always run your highest map unless you feel you can't complete it. Don't worry about holes in your Atlas, work upwards and fill in the holes later. I discussed this a bit in my video on early Atlas exploration, posted a couple of days ago, and I'll put a link to it below. But basically, it was for a whole period of time the wrong decision to do this. Was you always should fill out all the holes before starting your new tiers, but that has changed. There's a few mechanics changes that have made it so that that's no longer needed. And I'll prioritize Zana's mission chain, and once you unlock her alternate of the same tier, you want to use it on any map you're repeating. So say you've already done a tier 5 pit map at some point. Sorry, tier 5 is not pit, tier 5 is pen. If you've already done pen, tier 5 pen before, and another map drops you a pen, then what you want to do is use Zana's alternate of the same tier on your pen, so that you get a different tier 5 that you can then complete. So keep doing this, and keep working until you shape the tier 1 to 5 unlocked, the Zana mod that shapes tier 1 to 5 map. Once you unlock that, and once you've completed at least one tier 11 map, then you want to spam run tier 5 maps using Zana's ability to shape them into tier 10s. Doing this will allow you to get a lot of tier 11 map drops, a lot of tier 10s and a lot of tier 9s, and get them at the point of the league that they're still worth a lot. And then you want to be selling these. Once your character feels stronger, push red maps and unlock the ability to shape tier 6 to 10 maps for 6 chaos, and do one tier 16 map as well. Ideally you want to pick a guardian that is connected to only one of the tier 15 maps. So I'd have to check the Atlas, but one of the tier 16 guardians is connected to 2 tier 15 maps, and the rest are all connected to 1. The map that is connected to 2 tier 15s will be in the highest supply, but will have no more demand. So for that than the others. So for that reason, you want to do the other ones where possible. Now, So spam your tier 10s with the +5 levels this way, and sell your tier 13 to 16 natural maps at exorbitant prices. Sell high item level Var Regalias early, keep one for yourself, and then fit in the Merciless Labyrinth just at whatever point it feels right. The earlier the better. I would usually say do it before you push into yellow maps. You want to level a Discipline, and you want to do the Eternal Labyrinth at some point as well. The Eternal Labyrinth can take quite some time to unlock. You need to get all 6 trials, and because of the way that randomness works, I did some numbers on this, and it turns out that with the trials being in 10% of zones, which we believe to be true, I don't know if it still is, on average you actually need to do 147 maps in order to see all 6 of the trials. And you will get your second last one on average after only 87, but it then takes another 60 maps to get the last one on average. There are various trade channels that you can be in where players who unlock, say, a Trial of Burning Rage early will sell a portal into their map. The Trial of Burning Rage will be complete, they've already taken the offering, and they'll ask you for a couple of Chaos Orbs in order to come in and do the trial and get credit for it. This is actually a very solid deal if your character is one that gets a lot out of the Eternal Labyrinth. In previous leagues where the Eternal Labyrinth was a better source of loot than it is today, these days it's been replaced entirely by delves for loot, but back in the olden days of Path of Exile, when the Eternal Labyrinth was much more lucrative than it is now, it was actually worth paying people, as much as 10, even 20 chaos just to get your last trial so that you could get into the Eternal Labyrinth as soon as possible. People usually charge less than that, but even if they were charging 10, 20 chaos, it was worth paying. Nowadays, you want to do your Eternal Labyrinth for the extra Ascendancy points. There'll be a moderate to large character boost, character power boost, but you're only going to really be running them once. Last things I want to touch on, delve strategy. I want to get into the mines reasonably early, but not until the map selling pandemonium ends. So once we get to the point that tier 15 maps are no longer worth a premium early league price, at that point I'm going to start pushing the delves. Azurite is key early. You need to get all your upgrades, but the first ones I'm going to get are Flare Radius and the Sulfite Cap. Flare Radius is really good because it gives you that emergency panic button. If you think the way that a Life Flask works, a Flare Radius is a boost essentially gives you that sort of safety, because wherever you are, you can just go, oh, panic, Flare Radius, darkness damage immediately stops, and can't restart for a bit. As long as you've got 100% Flare Radius, wherever you've thrown your flare, it will be immediately affecting you again. So it means that you stop taking darkness damage and you get a bit of a reprieve where you're not taking it. That's enough time to hit your flasks to kill a few monsters around you. Also, if you get swarmed by monsters in the darkness, and that's not even necessarily darkness farming, that can just be because the cart's got away from you, then the larger your flare radius, the more of a radius of monsters you can hit and kill. Sulfite Cap's essential because you'll start getting larger piles of sulfite in maps. I don't worry about darkness farming early on, and you'll need to do a number of sub-map tier delves for Azurite, and you want to do this before you hit level 80. I've finished up the guide on the website with a quick trials cheat sheet, just a list of the 6 trials and the order that they're in. This is information you can get in a lot of other places, but it's just convenient to have all in one spot, I think. Anyways, that's my early league plans, and we'll be getting started on the league in just a few hours' time. So I'll leave it there, upload this, and then I'll start uploading gameplay footage tomorrow.